or Paige Leah to bring it to the table.
For the petitions, the member for Northumberland Quinte.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have a petition here. Whereas residents of Ontario want a moratorium on all further industrial wind turbine development until an independent third-party health and environmental study has been completed, and whereas people in Ontario living within close proximity to industrial wind turbines have reported negative health effects, we need to study the physical, social, economic and environmental impacts of industrial wind turbines, and the Auditor General confirmed wind farms were created in haste and with no planning. We, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly of Ontario as follows: that the Ontario government place a moratorium on the approval of any wind energy projects, and that a moratorium on the construction of industrial wind projects until further studies on the potential adverse health effects of industrial wind turbines, their effect on the environment, the potential devaluation of residential property are completed, and that any industrial wind projects not currently connected to the grid be cancelled. I agree with this petition, Madam Speaker, and I'll fix my name to it.
Thank you. The member for Nickel Belt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have this petition that comes from the people of Nickel Belt. It is short, but it is mighty. We, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly of Ontario to take the unfair HST off of hydro and home heating bills. I fully support this petition. Will I fix my name to it and ask Ali to bring it to the table?
Further petitions? The member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a petition from a very active individual of Ned McGuinness, and it reads to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, whereas collecting and restoring old vehicles honours Ontario's automotive heritage while contributing to the economy through the purchase of goods and services, tourism, and supports special events, and whereas the stringent application of emission regulations for older cars equipped with newer engines can result in fines and additional expenses that discourage car collectors and restorers from purchasing are pursuing their hobby, and whereas newer engines installed by hobbyists in vehicles over 20 years old provide cleaner emissions than the original equipment, and whereas car collectors typically use their vehicles only on occasional basis during 4 or 5 months a year, therefore be it resolved that the Ontario Legislature support Ontarians who collect and restore old vehicles by amending the appropriate laws and regulations to ensure vehicles over 20 years old and exempt from dry clean testing shall be exempt from additional emissions requirements enforced by the Ministry of the Environment, and governing the installation of newer engines into older cars and trucks. And I fix my name in full support, Speaker.
Thank you. The member for Nickel Belt.
I have a petition from people from Nickel Belt, whereas there is an increasing number of abuses and care for people who are in long-term homes, and whereas people have less options and don't want to complain because they think that maybe they are going to be victimized. Some old people are left in a very bad condition, and whereas Ontario is only one of 2 provinces where the Ombudsman doesn't have supervision over long-term care, we need transparency and consistency in our health system. Therefore, we ask the Legislative Assembly of Ontario to have a larger mandate for the Ombudsman so that he could supervise long-term care home to protect elder people. And I agree with this petition. I'm going to sign, and I'm going to ask Ali to bring it to the clerk.
The member for Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I have a petition here to the Legislative Assembly. Whereas beginning the 1st of January 2013, WSIB was expanded to include groups of employers and principals who had previously been exempt from the WSIB and who had private insurance. And whereas the new financial burden does nothing to improve worker safety and only drives up the cost of doing business in Ontario, we, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly of Ontario as follows: to repeal the statutory obligations created by Bill 119. Speaker, I agree with this petition. There's been over 5,000 signatures, and I will give it to Emily to bring to the table.
Further petitions? The member for Leeds Grenville.
Petition to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, whereas Ontario's Drive Clean program was implemented only as a temporary measure to reduce high levels of vehicle emissions and smog, and whereas vehicle emissions have declined so significantly from 1998 to 2010 that they no longer are among the major domestic contributors of smog in Ontario. And whereas the overwhelming majority of reductions in vehicle emissions is a result of factors other than Drive Clean, such as tighter manufacturing standards for emission-controlled technologies. And whereas the Minister of Environment has ignored advances in technology and introduced a new computerized emissions test that is less reliable and prone to error. And whereas the new Drive Clean test has caused the failure rate to double in less than 2 months as a result of technical problems with the new emissions testing method. And whereas the new emissions test has caused numerous false fails, which have resulted in the overcharging of testing fees for Ontario drivers and car dealerships, thereby causing unwarranted economic hardship and stress. Therefore, we, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly as follows: that the Minister of the Environment take immediate steps to begin phasing out the Drive Clean program. I'm pleased to affix my signature and send it to the table with Paige Andrew. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
That's a good petition.
The member for Simcoe Grey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, whereas we oppose the termination of the operating budget for Springwater Provincial Park and Springwater Township on March 31st, 2013, we, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly of Ontario as follows. We ask that the park remain operating and facilities such as the animal sanctuary, cabins, shelters, playground equipment, and ground maintenance remain intact and operating. Madam Speaker, I agree with the petition and I will sign it. Thank you.
Petitions?